Okay, I said I'd make a video to show the process I use to make those finished pendants from potter's dies. So I was going to make a couple this morning, so I'll go ahead and make the video and show you guys how I do it. Now just a warning, this might be a long video because I'm not going to do a lot of editing to this, and I'll show the entire process, so feel free to skip through to the parts you want. But if you haven't seen them, these are some I've made thus far. All of these, with the exception of one, I think, it's made from potter dies. So I don't know in the video how well you can see them, but they're the Celtic knot, snakehead, some of the heart stars, even the shallow dies with the Texas Longhorn, and then the biggest one I've made so far is this lion. It's about close to 1.5 ounces from the big lion, or wildcat I call it, die. So let's get into how we'll go about doing these. So today I'm going to make a few, but I think for the purpose of this video I'll just do one, and then I'll turn the video off and make the other ones. So let's start with this lion. I think this is a lion, a tiger, or something like that. It's a potter die, but it's different than the other one I just showed you. So the first thing I do with these before I'm melting the silver in them is that I polish just a little bit the inside of the die to make sure that when I melt silver in it that it pops out easy. It's not really that important, I found, in the shallow ones, but these that are thicker, deeper, they can be really tough to get out if you don't do that. So what I do is I think you could do anything, use anything, but I use this Mother's Mag aluminum polish. I use it for a lot of stuff, and polishing coins and all kinds of things. So I just put a little bit on inside the die, don't let it dry, and then take a jeweler's cloth and wipe it out, and shine it up just a little bit on the inside and around the outside, because when you smash in the press the silver, it's going to smash all around the outside here. So shine it up a bit with that, and then just as an extra sort of lubricant, I put a drop of 3-in-1 oil in the die and then wipe it off. So let it coat in there really well, and then take a shop rag or a towel or something, wipe it out. Now that should be good to allow that silver to release once it's pressed on the press. Now when I'm just doing a few of these, melting small amounts of silver, then I just use this little handheld crucible that I have here. I think I bought this on eBay for a few bucks. I can't remember how much I paid, but it's not that much. If I'm melting pure silver and doing a small amount, I do use this. If I'm melting something other than pure silver, if I'm doing sterling or 90% silver, or if I have foreign coins that might be 70%, 40%, something like that, then I don't try to melt it in this. Or if I'm doing a lot, what I have here is a desktop furnace. I won't go into this a lot, but this is a nice little machine here. It's 110 volt. It's really good, and I've melted a lot of silver in this really fast. It pulls down a lot of current, But those, they're not cheap. I think I paid $600-700 for that. So if you're doing a lot, it might be worth the investment. Anyway, I have some scrap silver in here from Pure Silver rounds, and sometimes what I use for my silver is just these generic silver 1-ounce silver bars that I buy. These things, you can buy them pretty much at silver spot price, and they're never going to be worth anything more than maybe 50 cents a buck over spot. So it's about the cheapest I can find pure silver to melt. You may have other sources, but I use that. Now some of these things are collectible. If you get the Engelhart bars and that, I wouldn't melt those, but some of these generic ones, that's an easy way to get silver cheap to melt in your crucible here. One of these 1-ounce bars, fits in there pretty well to melt. And then to melt them with, I use this torch here. I bought this at Home Depot, I think, and they sell these blue propane tanks. That's what I use for most of my stuff when I'm just annealing silver or annealing coins and so forth. But they also sell these yellow tanks, and it's called MAP, M-A-P. And I used to sort of understand the difference. It's been a while, but these burn a lot hotter. That's really all you need to know. So, and they fit on the same torch ends as the blue ones. So I bought a few of these yellow ones that I use when I'm melting silver. You just get a hotter flame and it's easier to melt. So just put your silver in the crucible and start melting. I sort of keep my die here handy because the silver, once you melt it, when you take the flame off of it, it'll start hardening real quick. So you want to have things nearby that you're going to use. So I have my die here, have my crucible with my silver in it. I have a pair of pliers here that I use because once you pour that silver in the die, it's going to be very hot. You don't want to touch it. So I have pliers here that I use to transfer this over to my press once the silver's melted in it. So I have all that laying right here, readily available to you. And start your melting. Now I don't know how well you can hear me with this torch burning, but you can see I have a ball of silver rolling around in there now. All of it's not melted, but I have that ball that's completely melted. So what I like to do is just melt enough off and eyeball it so that I sort of judge how much I need in that ball to fill my die. I don't have to melt all of the silver in the crucible, just enough to fill the die. And then make sure you have the edge good and hot so that it will flow over it and not dry and stick. And I also like to hit the die a couple times to get it warmed up. I don't like to pour hot metal on a cold surface. It's just if there's water and stuff that it could flare up. And so I think it's just a good habit to heat up that die a little bit. Now there, it looks to me like that's going to be plenty of silver to fill that lion's head. And it's melted real well, it's rolling around, it's not still solid underneath, so it's ready to pour. I'm just going to heat the edge. And then pour it in. Okay, and that wasn't the best pour in the world because you can see I sort of hit the side. But it doesn't really matter because it's still going to be pretty soft. So once you put it on the press, you'll be able to move that metal around a good bit. So I bring it over here, put it on my 20 ton, and I have this steel puck that I put on top of it just to give it a good press. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in just a second here. But let's get this press going. had to wait for the air compressor to turn off so you could hear me. So at this point, you don't want to touch any of this because it's pretty hot. That heat transfers up through everything. So I have these big pliers here so that I can handle everything. Now take it off. I don't know if you can see, but right there, the way I'm holding this at about 9 o'clock, I can still see some of the dye where it's not there. So I'm gonna put it on, press it again. Now, if your press is good, you know, I have this cheap Harbor Freight thing I've been using a long time. It's not level. I know that it presses more on the back than the front and so forth. So I'm gonna put it back on. I'm gonna turn that opening toward the back of the press where I know that it presses uneven back there. Put my puck back on and press more. So the thing is, you just want to make sure that you can't see any of the actual impression in the dye. You want to have that completely covered so that you have good coverage in the dye. And this 20-ton that I have here, I have a jack on it as well. So I have it here powered. I take it down, the hydraulic air, and then stop and I hand crank. Again, if you have a good press, you won't have to do that probably. This thing here is just cheap. I've had it for a couple years. It does the job for me, but one of these days I'm gonna get a better press. But the point here is that you can move this metal a lot for a long time. I still have a little bit there that I want to make sure that I get covered. I'm gonna put it here, press again. Ideally, I would do this a lot faster, but since I'm talking, it's taking a little more time and the silver's getting harder. But the point is, you can still move that silver a lot with your press, even a few minutes after you take it off the heat. So you don't have to have a perfect pour covering everything when you pour it in. You can smash it down so that it fills the dye. Okay, maybe just a little bit more back there. As you can see now there, I have complete coverage of the impression in that die. So I have silver spread all around so that it's covered it completely. That's what you want to do. So the reason I showed you all that is that I guess the point to take away here is you don't have to have a perfect pour where it's covering every little bit of the die. You can spread that silver out even a good time, 3 or 4 or 5 minutes after you take the heat off of it, if you have a good press. And that press, I don't know if I mentioned, it's a 20-ton, and the bottle jack is getting a little bit weak on this, so even though it's a 20-ton press, I doubt that I have more than probably 10, 12 tons of pressure on this thing these days. So when you're working with pure silver, you don't really need that much pressure either. So I'll bring it back over here, and now, since I took the time to polish it and put oil on it and everything, it should pop out pretty easily. Still, don't touch the die. It stays hot for a long time. I just take a screwdriver or whatever and get around the edges of it and just try to pop it off. Get that out, then take your silver and quench it in water, and then you'll be able to handle it. Okay. At this point, I have a good impression of the lion. I've got a lot of material around and so forth. So probably for most of you that work with this stuff, you know everything to do from here. But I'm going to, since I have the video going, I still have 70% of battery or so left. I'll go ahead and just sort of show you everything I do to get a finished product. So if you're interested, watch. If not, it's okay too. So now to trim the silver off, I just use a jeweler's saw. So let me set this up and show you a couple things that I have here that I work with. I have this tool here. I think I bought this off eBay to put coins and jewelry and stuff into hold while I'm cutting them. So I'm going to put that on my bench here, so I'll show you how it works. So this here, I'm sure a lot of you probably have these, but it just has a little pressure point here that will open this, and you can slide whatever you're working on in here and hold it while you're cutting or trimming. So I'll put that in there. I have some blades here and just a cheap jeweler's saw. I think Potter sells probably better ones on his site. And I use, for this kind of stuff, I use a number 2 blade. And what I have found, just I learned this through trial and error, you guys probably second nature if you do a lot of this, is the key to being able to cut through this really quick and to not break a dozen blades trying to do this, is to keep the blade and the metal oiled. So I use that same 3-in-1 oil when I'm trimming this excess off. I just put a drop of 3-in-1 on the silver, and that makes a world of difference when I'm trying to cut this. Now when I cut this, I don't try to get right up next to the image and make it perfect. I just want to get the majority of the silver off. And then the second process, I'm going to take it over to my grinding wheel, and that's when I'll get the rest of it off and make it look a lot better. So you'll see what I'm talking about in a minute. So let me get this cut on. Put that oil on it, and this blade slides through this pure silver almost like butter. Makes a huge difference. I can't tell you how much stuff I cut and broke blades after blade after blade before I discovered that really what I needed to do was put a drop of oil on this and solve all those problems. I also have, because I'm getting old and I can't see as well anymore, I have these, I don't know what you call them, but it's a headset with these magnifying glasses on. Makes a huge difference for me when I'm trying to see what I'm doing here. Now that I have the majority of the excess silver cut from around the edges, I still have a lot of cleaning up to do. But what I'll typically do then is I'll take this, put it back in the die, give it one more good press in order to sharpen up the details. Because if you think about it, when you're pressing this originally, okay, screw down now. When you're pressing this originally, you have all that silver spread out over the surface of the die, and you're pressing it with the plate. You're really pressing the silver against the surface, and you're not getting as much pressure in the detail that you want here. When you trim all that off, now when I press, I'm getting a lot more pressure into the actual area of the image. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but it does to me, and it seems to help anyway. So bring it back over here then, and just give it one more good press before I do any sort of cleanup on the grinding wheel. Back over here and pop it out. There you go. Help sharpen up those images some. Now you can see, you should be able to see here, I still have a lot of material around the image now that I'll want to remove. I could take the saw and try to go around and saw that off, but I don't really care much for using a saw. When I get it down this much, then I take it over to a grinding wheel. So now I take this over to my little mini grinding wheel. This is another Harbor Freight purchase. It's a 3-inch multi-purpose grinder, and it has a small grinding wheel on one side and sort of a buffing pad on the other, and both of these things work really well. This thing's variable speed, so it's really nice. Most of the stuff you get from Harbor Freight is sort of cheap stuff. It doesn't last very long, but I've had this 2 or 3 years, and I love it. It's ideal. So I take this and this is what I use on the wheel then to grind off the excess silver around the image to get it down where I want it. Now when you're doing this, let me see if I can get this set up. Yeah, that should work. When you're doing this, the silver is going to get real hot. It's going to burn your hands. So what I do keep a glass of water beside it, and I dunk the silver in the water to cool it off as I'm grinding. The key is to cool it before it gets hot, because this gets hot quick and it'll burn you quick. So some of you may have better techniques. If so, that's great, but this is just sort of what I use. Okay, so now starting to look pretty good. Get over here out of the sun. I never really know how close to hold these things to this camera. If you get them too close, it's blurry, and too far away, you can't see, but hopefully you can see that. Pretty good. I've got everything trimmed down now so that it's the way I want it as a pendant. So now at this point, I go ahead and put the hole in that I'm going to use for the jump ring. and then I'll do some final sort of smoothing of the edges and so forth before I finish it. So the way I do that, by the way, the excess silver that I trimmed off here just goes back in my crucible for the next time that I melt. So what I do is I take the pendant and I figure out where I want the hole to be. I don't really, on this one, I really don't have any choice but to sort of put it through the main at the top. I could have left some excess material at the top and then put it in the hole. I didn't do that, so I guess this one I'll just drill right through the main. But what I do is I take a punch. This is just a nail set that I got at Home Depot. And when you buy these, they have sort of a blunt end, and they're used to countersink nails that you're nailing into wood. Nails that don't have a head on it, that you nail down into wood to cover. So what I did is I take one of these, I take it to my grinder, and I grinded it down to a sharp point on the end. And then it makes the perfect tool in order to start a hole in your pendants and so forth for the drill bit. So the first thing I do is I take this and hammer down to get a good indent in it. I don't think you're going to probably be able to see that, but I have a good indent in there now that's a starter hole for the drill bit. If you don't do that, if I don't do that anyway, I don't know about you, how you do things, but if I don't do that, then when I drill my holes on a drill press here, some coins and stuff. But if I don't do that, then the drill bit tends to run. Sometimes I get a hole where I don't want it. But by doing that, then it gives me a place to where the drill bit fits down in the hole, the starter hole, and then it doesn't run. And again, on this, like anything else, like a lot of other stuff, I put a drop of 3-in-1 oil, and it just makes that bit slide through there a lot easier, because this will get very hot as well if you have a good thick piece of silver that you're drilling. Silver heated up quite a bit right there just with that small amount of drilling. But it wasn't so hot that it burned me. So just be careful when doing that, because it heats up as well. Every time I have a sliver of silver or something like that, I just take it and throw it in my crucible. Okay, so now I have a hole in the top. So at this point then, you know where that hole is. The reason I do that before I do the finishing is because it'll have little burrs and stuff around us. Camera turned off there for some reason, I don't know. But so now at this point, what I do is around the edges of the pendant, it has the wheel marks from the grinder. I have seen people leave those. It sort of does have a unique look, but I like to clean all that up. So the way that I go about doing that is then I take my Dremel with a small grinding stone on the end of it, and I go over it and clean up the edges of the pendant. So we'll do that. Okay. Very nice. So now it's looking a lot better around the edges, so forth. So at this point, I bring it over and take some 320 grit sandpaper and just hit those edges where the Dremel was to help get some of the marks off that the grinding bit left on there. Okay. And then for all of mine that you've seen probably when I've posted is I stamp the back of them. So the way that I do that is I take my metal stamps. You can pick these up anywhere. Let's see. 1 because this is the first one I've done, and a 9. And the easiest way to stamp these that I've found is to put the pendant back in your die. That way it holds it really good and it's not going to mar up the face of the die. And then I do my 999 for pure silver. Use the same nail punch. Put the dot. And then I punch a 1 on this because this is the first one I've made of this one. If I make another one, I'll remember 2. So now that I have those in, then I take the same 320 grit sandpaper and I clean up the back. So there. Now I've got the back good and clean and smooth, and when I patina it, then the numbers will sort of pop. If you decide to patina it, you might decide to keep yours as silver. But then sort of the last thing I do on the finishing is I come back over to my little Harbor Freight thing, and this wheel on the other side, buffing wheel, it's not really a buffer, I don't know what it's called, let's see. It comes in this little 2-piece set. You can buy them individually, but they call it a fiber wheel. But the thing, that fiber wheel is really good for taking sand marks and stuff like that out of your silver and so forth. So, and shining it up really well too. So the last thing I do in sort of the finishing process is I put it on that buffing wheel. Now be careful if you're doing this like I'm doing with bare hands, because that thing there can burn you pretty quick if you put your hand in it too much. Difference between when I just hit it with that wheel and where I don't. Okay. So just hit that lightly, it shines it up really well. So at this point, I could just shine it up more if I wanted to leave it sort of silver, but I like to patina, so might as well just go ahead and show you how I do that while we're here. I'm sure all of you know, but got the video going, so why not? I use liver of sulfur. Just put a couple drops in my water. It doesn't take much. Mix it up and I heat it for about a minute. It doesn't need to be boiling, but it does a lot better if it's good and warm. So just pop it in the microwave, heat it up for a minute. And just drop it in and let it set for about a minute. It doesn't really take long. While that's taking effect, I use a steel wool 4 zeros. As my granddad used to say, 4/0 steel wool. Okay, hardest part sometimes getting the pendant back out of the liver of sulfur. There we go. Rinse it off. And that way I always come out with what I call a good sort of pewter look to the silver. So then it's just a simple matter of taking the steel wool and taking some of the patina off so that the highlights can show up and get good contrast. Oh yeah, I wasn't sure how that's going to turn out, but when you put that liver of sulfur on and patina it, man, it really pops those details. So this has some really good detail in it. So I just take the steel wool and work it in and get it to where I like it. Take enough off that I sort of like the look. And then I just take a jeweler's cloth to sort of shine it up. Sometimes on these I'll use this mother's mag, especially on the coins that I do, to shine them up. And on these pendants I've found that I don't really need to do that. I just use the jeweler's cloth and it makes them look really nice. Yeah. Pop a 8mm jump ring on this thing and we'll take a look at it. There you go. Wow, that's good. So now there you have I think, I'm sure you can't see it very well on this the video, but I'll take some pictures and put into post. But have a really nice looking, detailed, pure silver pendant. And it's probably, with that one, I'm going to guess it's about 6 or 7 grams. Let's just take a look while we got it here. Yep, 6.4 grams, pure silver pendant. So that's how I do it anyway. Hopefully you picked up a tip or two.